Well, good evening, all. Thank you so much for coming. Um, I am Jason Winchell, a board member of Inclusion Matters and a high school educator and a parent to a child with Down syndrome and autism. Obviously, I am not my beautiful wife, Melissa. She is unfortunately down with the flu. So I am on deck tonight to run this, and we should have a great time this evening. Today's webinar is a result of a conversation my spouse, Dr. Melissa Winchell, had via Facebook with one of today's panelists, Rue Cream. A year ago, one of our town departments announced on Facebook its fundraiser for Autism Speaks in honor of April's Autism Acceptance Month. Melissa commented there, thanking the department for their care for autistic people and providing them some resources about why Autism Speaks is actually considered a dangerous organization by many autistic people. Rue commented there too, and out of that conversation, this event was created. I am a parent of an autistic child. I am not autistic. I am allistic. Like so many parents, I have a lot to learn about autism. Here at Inclusion Matters, we continue to notice the ways in which parents of disabled children are often unaware of and disconnected from communities of the disabled. As a parent and as a board member of Inclusion Matters, I want to learn from autistic people themselves. I want my autistic child to belong to that vibrant and diverse community. I want her to advocate along with the other autistic people for a more accepting and inclusive world. I want her to be proud to be autistic. I want our family to stand with the communities of my daughter's disabilities, to ally with them, and to work with them for better schools and communities. Disability isn't a bad word, and neither is autistic. I'm learning that as I listen and learn from so many disabled communities. And that's the invitation tonight, to listen and to learn. For that reason, we have muted all mics for the webinar, and your role here is to listen, not to speak. For that reason, the chat is open, so please use that to ask questions there, and we'll return to those questions if we are able to before the end of our webinar. We encourage you that the best way of viewing the panel this evening is to choose Speaker View, which will highlight for you the person who is speaking. To do this, click on View in the top right corner of your screen and choose Speaker View. And now I am happy to introduce tonight's panelists. I want to thank them for assuming the burden of educating those of us who are neurotypical, who know this is a job you should not need to assume, and we acknowledge our own ignorance and our gratitude to you. We also acknowledge that you are speaking as a member of the autistic community and not on behalf of the entire autistic community, which is far more diverse in race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, culture, and other identities and experiences than we were able to represent tonight. Our first panelist, and this is be read in the order that they will be answering the questions for this evening, is Rowan Cream. Rowan is an autistic writer, potter, and multimedia artist. She has a certificate in animation from RISD and has been published in Wizards in Space Literary Magazine. And you can view her work on Instagram under the name @SweetTomatoStudio. Rue Cream is an autistic writer, photographer, and gardener whose work has appeared in Home Education Magazine, Life Learning Magazine, and the Natural Child Project. She is author of the book, Parenting a Free Child, An Unschooled Life. She and her husband have 2 adult children, one who is autistic. DJ Young was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome at the age of 12, following many years of behavioral and academic difficulties, both at home and in school. This diagnosis enabled him to get the support and accommodations that he needed to succeed. He graduated Attleboro High School, where he studied civil engineering in the technical education program. From there, he earned his Bachelor of Arts degrees in analytic philosophy at Bridgewater State University. And he would later pursue graduate theological studies at the Catholic University of America in Washington, D.C., Boston College in Boston, Mass., and Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland. He later discovered a strong personal finance strong passion for personal finance when he studied accounting at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. And he is now a consumer banking specialist and intends to pursue an MBA very soon. DJ is grateful for his diagnosis every day because he truly believes that it has played a major role in all of his achievements. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Our first question, when did you realize you were autistic, and what did this mean for you? And how was autism talked about in your family? Rowan?
So growing up, I always sort of suspected, like, you know, when you're the weird kid, even if you don't understand why, like, how can people sentences when music is playing? And why do the other kids think I'm mean, even when I think I'm being helpful? Why is every other sentence coming out of my mouth blatantly or covertly aligned from Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender? That kind of thing. If everyone else is seeing and hearing and feeling these things, why am I the only one who needs to go sit in a dark room after 45 minutes? And all my life, I'd been asking my mom, is this normal? Does everyone do these things? It doesn't seem like anyone feels this way. And she'd say, yes, of course, all of that was normal. And now she's here with me today to the fact that those were all diagnostic criteria or associated traits for autism. You know, all these books growing up where the main character was clearly coded as autistic, and I would relate to them so much and just want them to say the word so that that would like give me permission, but they never did. And there's this idea that autism is kind of a dirty word, like you don't want to label anyone. You think it's progressive to just define the character as a person and nothing further, but person and autistic are not mutually exclusive terms. And for a while there, I kind of thought, you know, my family, we all knew. But then one day my mom was talking about an autistic character on the show, one of the very few I've seen who was actually called autistic out loud. She said, I always really relate to characters that are like, and she sounded kind of confused, and that confused me. So in my usual blurting compulsive honesty, I said, Mom, that's because we're both autistic. I've lost my place. She thought everyone was like this. So, and my thought, oh, she's just like her mom. So we never really realized that until later. And the moment we started naming it, you know, all my relationships improved. People who were willing to listen finally understood that I'm not attention seeking or mean, because they had something to call it, to position it as simply something outside of their own experience. And, you know, my ability to self-regulate improved. Now I know how to find the tools I need. It's been a really positive thing in my life to have that word and those resources to help me communicate with others and to help others learn how to communicate with me.
Thank you, Rue.
So as Rowan said, I had no idea I was autistic until I was an adult. And I saw this character, and she wrote a whole script before she went over to her friend's house to talk to him. And I said, you know, this is me. How come I just like this person? So I went to a neuropsychologist and I met with her over 6 months or so. And yeah, I'm autistic. So I didn't know that growing up. When I told my immediate family, everyone was very supportive. My extended family, they didn't believe it. And a thing I hear a lot is, you don't look autistic. And there is no look to autism. And also women aren't autistic. Well, we are. So it was a huge relief to me to get the diagnosis. And it gave me a language for what I have been experiencing my whole life. Let's see. Oh, I also wanted to talk about labels a little bit. So most people will look at me and say, oh, she's high functioning. She doesn't know about what my children go through. But the fact is that I am masking. I'm working very hard to appear normal right now. And it's exhausting. And I'm probably going to have to rest for days after this. What labels do is they make it seem as though we are only what you can see. And in fact, I have all sorts of supports that I need. I can't work a job. I can do lots of good things and do them well, but I can't work a job. I can't talk on the telephone. You'll hear I'm losing my voice. I have selective mutism. So I think it's important to know that there's more to an autistic person than what you see.
Thank you so much. DJ.
Well, I suppose I always knew that I had something that caused me to act and think differently from other people. What it was, I didn't know, but I knew that there was something that made me different from most other people I was around. A name was put to this something when I was diagnosed as a child after a long observations and different tests really throughout elementary school into middle school. And I was diagnosed with Asperger's. They don't call it that anymore. It's now called autism spectrum disorder, but at the time of my diagnosis, it was Asperger's syndrome. And being diagnosed with Asperger's really meant a great deal to me because it meant clarity and it meant understanding. And it gave me this sort of scientific / medical basis, which I was longing for all these years. And it just gave me a foundation that I could understand myself in a much better way. In terms of my family life, with the autistic diagnosis. It was not so widely discussed within my family, especially at the beginning. And I attribute that to just so many questions they had and just lack of information. So it was a time of great inquiry. But as time went on, everybody became much more comfortable with it, and especially me. So growing in that knowledge of it, of course, through personal experience, but also through lots of good research and reading, really helped to make it a pleasant experience and make it a very enlightening experience.
Thank you all for that. And I did try to mute it, hopefully the bell. Sorry that you were hearing that. We will work on that and make sure that that's all taken care of. Back to you, Rowan. What are some myths that you've encountered about autistic people or autism?
So we're all boys who like math and don't care about your feelings, and we're probably under 10 years old. I'm not sure what they think happens to those boys after that age, but beyond that, there's this idea that we were allistic people who broke somewhere along the way, that inside of us is like an allistic person who was tragically vaccinated, which is an idea from a falsified study, and the researcher lost his license. But that's not stopping Autism Speaks. It is okay if your friend, child, sister plays with their toys by lining them up. I assure you they're having a blast, and it is a lot more involved than it looks. One thing I realized preparing for this is that I have a lot of questions for allistic people. Like, having a special interest can feel like being in love. Why is there the expectation and that it is, a behavioral problem somehow? What's wrong with having that appreciation for the world around you? Eating the same breakfast every morning comforts me. Everybody has some little routine thing, right? That gets you through the day. And there are just a lot of things that we as autists can struggle with, but it really seems like it's often very much not the things that people think that they are. Or so it's important, and before you put that label on something, to ask, is it harmful or is it just different enough to make you uncomfortable?
Before we get to Rue, you did mention one word, Rowan, that I'm not sure everyone knows, the word autistic. Could
Yes.
you just define that, please?
The word autistic refers to someone who is not autistic. They can still be in some way neurodivergent, such as having ADHD, but they are just not autistic.
Thank you very much. Rue.
So the myth that I think is most important to me is this theory of mind issue that we do not have empathy. And in fact, most of us, many of us, have so much empathy. We feel every emotion, not just from the person we're talking to, but from other people in the room. And it's like a weight. And so there's this thing that's been coined the double empathy problem. And the question is, why is what if autists aren't deficient in communication? What if, just as we cannot picture what goes on in an autistic mind or predict their behavior, they also cannot do that to us, because communication is a two-way street. So if there's a problem on both ends, the autistic shouldn't be cast as the problem. So that's an important one for me. And another is that meltdowns are tantrums. Meltdowns are not temper tantrums. They're a physical response to physical changes in our bodies. We can get into a fight or flight mode or freeze. And we can get a huge adrenaline rush and a panic. And we're responding to those things. It's actual physiological experiences that we're responding to. And because autistic people don't know how to handle us when we are having one of those, it often gets worse and worse. So, we need people to learn more about it so that they know how to deal with us and to best help us. Let's see, another is, I think my last one is that non-speakers don't communicate. As I said, I have selective mutism. I can speak. I do not always speak. I cannot always speak. People communicate in so many different ways. Rowan and I have entire conversations in kind of humming tunes. I don't know how to explain it. And you can look at what a person's stims are. That is a language that people can learn to read. And it's just so important to try every means of understanding how your child or how your friend who's autistic is communicating. I think that's about it.
Great. DJ.
Well, there are three that come to mind. The first I'd like to mention is that we cannot properly mentally process information. This is, of course, a myth because we certainly can, but it's simply in a different way. So things are understood differently. It depends on, everybody's different. There is not an autistic way of thinking, but in that sense, it's typically in a way that's different from what a neurotypical would think. So it's not that we're not processing the information, it's that we're processing it differently. The second I'd like to mention, and this is of course a favorite that people like to use, is that we're socially awkward. Okay. Now, this is a myth because, in my opinion, awkwardness is a neurotypical creation. You see, awkwardness, to me, I've been in situations, especially when I was younger, talking to neurotypical groups, and everybody sort of looks at me, like, well, what did he just say? Or it's something that's created by them, but to me, I'm just speaking in a normal way. So awkwardness is very subjective and it's a creation. So I like to demystify that. And then the third is that we have obsessions. And this is a myth because they're not obsessions more than they're simply areas of interest that we know a great deal about, that we've spent a great deal of time involving ourselves with. And by speaking about them, we feel very natural. And it brings a sense of calm and comfort, at least speaking for myself. That's the sort of social product that I bring, and I try to be aware of the fact not to dominate conversation, because I get very involved in my interest, but it's not an obsession. It's more of a comfort zone. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Rowan, back to you. What do you wish holistic people knew about autism?
The question as it was given to me was parents. Holistic, what I wish.
Yes, you're right.
That's what I have prepared.
Sorry, my
What
bad.
I wish holistic parents knew about autism. I just really think that you should assume competence and default to compassion. We are whole entire people, and you can believe in what your child is experiencing, even if it doesn't make sense to you. For example, I don't like being touched by other people. As a baby, I would cry to be put down, and I've always been this way because I have sensory processing disorder. It's not actually that I don't like to be touched, it's that it hurts me. It causes actual immediate pain, kind of like an electric shock. On a side note, a lot of people think that this is tragic, but it's neutral. I don't miss my least favorite food. If my body didn't need water, I wouldn't be thirsty. I touch certain people in certain limited circumstances, and it's nice and everything. But anyway, my point is, it's all a real experience. Eating the wrong texture, or if that like reduces your child to tears, or it is because they're having a massively unpleasant experience. Bright light is like an air horn sounding next to my ear, and it all compounds on each other. It builds up. I'm sure there are a million things that upset your child that you just do not think are a big deal, but they're really happening. The toy matters that much. Their routine matters that much. The things that keep us regulated and happy are different than the things you might need, but we need them. So if you're ever frustrated because the autistic person in your life is melting down or shutting down or just plain at the end of their rope, remember that the society is built in a way that causes us pain and confusion and anxiety constantly. It's exertion constantly. If I walk a tightrope and you take away my net, or you jump on the wire, or you take away the stick, that's going to impact my situation a lot more than if you on the ground have any of that happen. So just be kind, believe your children, help them find what they need, and protect their access to it. It's not hurting anybody if that means letting them flap their hands. It's actually helping them directly. It's okay if they're carrying a stuffed animal into their 30s. It's going to be okay. That's it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rowan. Rue?
Well, I'd like to touch on what DJ brought up, and that is that special interests are important. They're so important. It's like diving in this pool of learning, and it's just the most wonderful feeling. It feels like you're using every part of your brain. And I would say that the special interest that Rowan has had, it's been like a master's level course in each subject. She knows it inside and out and backwards, and it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And so it does make it so that we don't want to do other things. And if we're interrupted in them, it can cause a real panic, a physical panic. So I wish people could be a little bit more compassionate about that and also not cast them in a negative light. Let's see what else. Oh, stimming. We need to talk about stimming. Please let your child stim in any way, anywhere, anyhow they want to. I'm holding this little plastic pottery bird right now that Rowan made me. I'm stimming as I'm talking to you. People think that stimming is distracting for other people, but I think that autistics need to keep in mind that we're distracted by so many things all day long. It's constant. And I think that other people can learn to accept being a little bit distracted too. So in that vein, I would encourage parents to get all sorts of stimming toys. Some people like to be poked, which is what this little bird does. It's a little pointy. Some people like to, twist a tangle, shoe necklaces like Rowan has. There's all sorts, and try them all if you are able to afford it. Try as many as you're able to, because they not only calm me or us, they make it so that we can pay attention to you more, and our audio processing is a little bit better. We can focus. So they're vital, and I think it needs to be not only allowed but encouraged. Let's see. Oh, I really recommend that parents look on the internet, on Twitter. There's an autistic Twitter. Actually, autistic is the hashtag. And also on YouTube, there's a video series by Amber Shafe, I think it is. It's called Ask an Autistic. And it is so much information. You'll probably learn about things you've not heard of. Possibly even if you're autistic, you might hear of things you've not heard of. So I think, reaching out and learning from autists is the way to go.
Great, thank you. DJ.
Those 2 points that were just made, I didn't prepare this, but it's so important I didn't think of it, so I'd like to add on that. I have a very, very difficult a sensory struggle with loud noises. So it could be as simple as the TV is too loud, or last week I was at my sister's birthday party and the music was very loud. I had to excuse myself. Other people around are enjoying it, and that's fine. But a lot of us on the autistic spectrum, we have these sensory difficulties which create great sensitivity. So for some people it's light, for some people it's sound, for some people it's just a whole mix of things. And me personally, I also don't like being touched, and I find myself seeking comfort in wearing several layers. So for instance, I wear a sensory vest, which is weighted and is compressed. That makes me feel very calm. I wear that most of the day, so it helps me a lot. So parents need to be aware of that. These are real difficulties, and we are receiving these difficulties as real discomfort. So parents should be aware of that. But also, on a lighter note, I just want to say that parents should know that autism brings more as an ability than it does as a disability. Autistic people bring unique gifts and talents which enable them to prosper as individuals and thus reach the same level of success, if not greater success, as neurotypical people. So we definitely stand out from the crowd, and I believe brings a unique variation to society. So recognizing if one of your loved ones or yourself has an autistic diagnosis, this is really a gift. The gifts and abilities far outweigh any deficiency. So that's what I'd like to say about that. Thank you.
Great, thank you for sharing. Rowan, back to you. Applied behavioral analysis, otherwise known as ABA, has become a controversial approach within the autistic community. Did you experience ABA as a child or an adult? And if so, what do you think about it?
I believe that ABA is harmful, but I have not experienced it, and I would recommend seeking out and learning from people who have, a range of people.
Great, thank you. Ruth?
So since we didn't know I was autistic, I did not experience it, but I do have some opinions on it because it has been a special interest of mine. And the first thing is that it's presented as the only option when a child gets a diagnosis, and it is not the only option, it is a choice. And many grown autists look back on it and say that it traumatized them. There are a couple of videos online of ABA autism training, and there's 6 of them that I found. I could only watch the first 2 because it made me so agitated and anxious just watching it. The instructors are, their therapists are supposed to talk in a louder than normal voice to people who have sensory issues with noise. They move the children's body parts. There's no bodily autonomy whatsoever, which is not only a problem, in the general sense that we want children to know that they own their own bodies, but also because that's a sensory nightmare to have somebody moving your body around. So on one of the videos, they say the goal of ABA is to modify self-stimulating behaviors so they are less disruptive and more socially acceptable. None of that is of benefit to the autistic person. That's for other people. So we're going to put children through 25, 35 hours a week, a full-time job of overstimulation and quiet hands, which is torturous, just so that they won't get bullied. Maybe they'll have a better chance at something. And it is possible to make the choice to accept autistic people as they are. And excuse me, the number of hours a week, I in school couldn't function for a full school day. I can't function in a job. So I can't imagine how exhausting it must be for a child to spend that many hours doing this. Even if some of it is, play. And I believe people have the best of intentions. They're trying to do the best by their children. But I do think more research should be done. It should be seen as a choice. Let's see. I also want to mention that it's really dehumanizing, in my opinion. It was in part created by a man named Ivar Lovis. And he was the same person who came up with gay conversion therapy. And here's what he said. He said, you have a person in the physical sense, but not in the psychological sense. You have to build the person. And I hope it's obvious to this group of people that we are a person and we don't need to be molded in any way. We can be accepted as we are.
Can I speak to that real quick? So he was actually in concentration camps.
Sure.
And what he meant when he said that they weren't a person was that when he looked at them, he thought that they felt how he felt in the concentration camp, which is still very harmful, obviously. And people do say that, autistic people aren't people. But
yeah, there were circumstances that brought him to that.
Yeah. I don't know that it's actually very important. I might be info dumping.
Okay. DJ?
I don't have as much knowledge of this type of therapy, if you will, if you can even call it therapy. But I remember as a young child that during all of the testing and observation I was going through, it did feel like I was a lab rat. I mean, I had people, staring at me, these whoever they were, psychologists or whatever, they would follow me in the classroom and they would just follow me around school all day long and just sit there and jot down notes. And of course, I was so young, I had no idea what they're doing. All I know is this person's following me around. And then it would later turn into, I got called into their office and I'm doing all these tests. And then they would try these different things like the body sock where you go inside and, I mean, this is just crazy stuff. And it just showed how great of an ignorance there was with autism in general. And it was just, I mean, there's so much that needs to be improved. And what I've my what I've come to realize is that simply the best way to know and understand an autistic person is quite simply just to interact with them like anybody else. That's how you're going to get to know them. It's not going to be, let's test this, let's make you wear this, let's take notes on you all day long, because that's going to exacerbate the situation. Because I can tell you from personal experience, that did not help me. Because the whole day I'm sitting there thinking to myself, who is this person and what do they want? And why are they staring at me? So, it's a much more natural getting to know the person just by talking, having a conversation like this. That's what's effective. This behavioral type of way of doing things is, in my opinion, is not the best option. It needs to be more natural. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, DJ. I've read that masking is a common experience for autistic people. In other words, autistic people are pressured into acting as if they do not have autism, even though doing so is exhausting and can lead to burnout. Rue, I know you mentioned this as well. So can you talk with us about your experiences with masking? Rowan, excuse me.
So it's hard to quantify masking for me. Like, a lot of us have been doing so much for so long that it's a strenuous, ongoing process separating what is natural to what we have had to do to receive basic respect, keep our jobs, earn our grades, survive. I don't think I've done it as much as most people. I was homeschooled. My mother is autistic. When people didn't respond well to me, my instinct was to find better people. But part of that is also that I'm not great at it. I realized pretty early on that I was never going to have an easy time socially. People were never going to think that I was normal. So instead, I focused on finding ways to enjoy myself without causing any harm. And even then, I had very little stamina for it. I'm contending with physical disabilities too here. A couple hours at a friend's house can wipe an autistic person out even without that. But I've never had an easy time making friends. And almost every friend I had growing up turned out to be neurodivergent in some way. Just because I was okay with being more or less an outcast in most settings doesn't mean it wasn't hard. I just knew that the alternative would have been more miserable to me. For me, like, socially, I kind of assume that everything I say is wrong and I'm going to be punished for it in some way. It's exhausting. Like, I put in time to be able to hold a conversation, like I studied. For example, I know that my natural inflection when speaking can sound very rude or even angry to autistic people, and I spend a great deal of energy adjusting for this. It's exhausting and it's heartbreaking at times when I slip up after all of that time and effort and hurt someone's feelings. Like, I've been working so hard on every sentence, and you can't assume good intentions from me for one. It often actually means that I'm invested in our conversation. I'm thinking hard. I'm comfortable. I mean, imagine having that upset people all of your life. Every sentence I speak to people I don't know well is specially tailored from phrasing to inflection to sound the way I know someone who is not autistic will be able to receive. I do it so much I barely notice it consciously until I slip up or get worn out. And, it's bad enough to know I've upset at someone, but that double standard, the double empathy problem that Mom was talking about, it's just heartbreaking. I mean, there's not a good way to communicate that I might need that faith off the bat most of the time, because I do have to adjust my speech that way in most situations. Sometimes I fly under the radar by explaining particular traits without saying I'm autistic, like I've mentioned, and people balk a lot less at hearing I have sensory processing disorder, which I think is important, to look at that and see how much you're othering the experiences of autistic people in general. It's important to understand that autistic communication is considered wrong because it is a deviation from the norm. studies show that autistic people communicate perfectly effectively with other autistic people. That's not less valid. That's not less useful. Learn how to communicate with people, even if they're autistic. We have to learn your instincts just to survive.
Thank you. Rue.
So I have memories that I know were my masking when I was a very, very little girl. I was not consciously aware that that's what I was doing, but I observed people very intently. I would have a friendship with just one person, and I would almost be, in some ways, become them, because it felt like everybody else knew how to behave and what was going on in general. And so I copied them. And what happened around the time that I was diagnosed, is that I went through a trauma and had what they call autistic burnout. And I was no longer able to mask. It went away. I couldn't do it. So it was more hard to speak, even harder to speak. So my stimming went nutso. My sense of a sensory assault, which is constant, got to the point where I just had to lie in bed. Lights and colors and seams, and even the color of your own clothes, everything is, assaulting you. So it got to the point where I couldn't function. So I spent a lot of time kind of recovering from that. And most people will tell you that you don't completely recover from that ever. And I think from my experience, that's true. But I do feel pressure as an adult to mask, because people assume you're not as intelligent if they see you stimming, flapping your arms. They don't take you seriously. They don't know what you're capable of. They assume you're not capable. And so I do mask. And another problem is that not everyone can mask. So what's such an important thing is for autistic people to become comfortable with our behaving as ourselves, because it's hurting us. You're asking too much of us.
Thank you. DJ.
This is a very interesting question, and I think it affects most of us who are dealing with autism in some form. I am one of those people who can mask, but only for a very short amount of time, because we've mentioned I like Ruth's term, the sensory assault. That's what it feels like. I have been in situations where I whether it's professional or whatever, but just trying to mimic that other person. One of my biggest struggles personally is eye contact. And it's either no eye contact at all, or I am staring at you. And there's no in between. I can never, it's a great difficulty. And I find that when I'm masking, it's of course the staring eye contact. And what happens is, as I'm holding this conversation and whatever, I begin to get dizzy. I begin to feel nauseous. This is all because of the amount of effort that is going into this. And this was a great revelation. Somebody actually called me out on this during a conversation with somebody in a professional setting. And they said, "My goodness, are you okay? You're as white as a sheet and you look like you're about to pass out." And I didn't even realize it, because I'm just so concentrated on trying to be a certain way in this conversation. Very, very difficult. And really, I don't think I could go more than 30 minutes, and that's pushing it. So that brings me to the point of masking. It's not good. It's not good for us. It's not good for the people we're conversing with. People need to just see us as we are, and that's what's going to be a natural conversation. People who know me and know about my background and my Asperger's and whatnot, they know it. This is nothing new, and they talk to me like anybody else. But if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I can sort of get a sense that they're a little bit uncomfortable when I'm in that situation. So masking, but like we've said so far, I think it is something that we feel pressured to do based upon society and the different roles we find ourselves within. So it is a struggle, and it takes a lot. So thank you.
Wow, thank you. That was very eye-opening. We know that autistic people are often misunderstood, excluded, or even mistreated in schools. What were your experiences in school? If you did not attend school, what creative alternatives to traditional schooling did you pursue, and why? Rowan?
So I was homeschooled. My parents met in high school, agreed that they were having a bad time, and more or less decided not to send their kids to school. It's no coincidence that my mother is an autistic person who went undiagnosed for so long. I don't know what my father's deal is, but I'm not about to look the gift horse in the mouth. Kind of consider it the greatest mercy of my life. Like, I know I would not have made it through traditional school in one piece. You know, a lot of my autistic friends ended up turning to homeschool once they reached high school because they were having so much trouble. And, you know, that mercy comes on the backs of my mother and dozens of other family members who never understood what they were experiencing. It's genuinely hard for me to believe that my grandfather flew under the radar. You know, I watched friends in public school jump through all these hoops trying to get their, you know, their documentation, and then even more trying to get those things implemented. People treated them like, you know, they were making something up. They were asking you, you know, to do the Cotton Eye Joe in the middle English class or something. And, you know, as for higher education, I've so far chosen to pursue certificate programs and uncredited classes for financial reasons and because of the freedom they give me to manage my own schedule according to my needs. I only have to work out my accommodations with a few people at a time. The amount of people I'm around is limited, and I don't have to be around them all day, every day. The amount of paperwork is also limited. Filling out forms make me incredibly anxious because the prompts feel very open-ended to me. I don't always have the usual required documentation. And, you know, a lot of autistic people don't drive. That was me for a long time. Everybody wants your license. And, you know, I think it's a shame because I had such a positive educational experience in childhood. I became someone who really loves to be a student, and I read textbooks for fun, but there are just so many barriers to continuing that pursuit.
Thank you. Rue?
So I don't have too much to say on this. School was not a good place for me. They labeled me as shy. And I used to say I'm painfully shy. And what I meant by that is it actually hurt my body. Being around people, even online like this, or talking to the cashier, or not talking to anybody, but there are people around, it hurts my body. So I took a lot of days off sick. I skipped so much in high school that they almost didn't want to graduate me. And I didn't have the language to explain what I was experiencing, even to myself. So was I just lazy? You know, was I just someone who didn't care about school? Well, in fact, I love learning. But that was not the way for me to learn. That's pretty much all I've got on that.
Thank you. DJ?
So I had many difficulties, and I'm going to classify it as pre-diagnosis and post-diagnosis. So pre-diagnosis was mostly elementary school, all of elementary school into middle school, the beginning of middle school. The difficulties I experienced were actually, believe it or not, with the teachers more than with the peers, because the teachers did not understand what I needed. So for instance, they would have big field day events and things like that. And I don't do those things. I don't do them to this day. I didn't do them then. And they would discipline me for you're not participating and things like that. So I was in and out of trouble for things like that. You know, I would get overstimulated in class because they would be doing lots of crazy things, music, movies, things like that. They didn't understand, and they saw me as a rebellious person as opposed to a person who needs a legitimate accommodation. Once I got the diagnosis, that's when the accommodations started to begin. Unfortunately, of course, high school, there was bullying. However, I found that with self-advocacy, as well as utilizing every accommodation and resource that was made available to me, that was very, I'm not gonna say easily, but in a very straightforward way overcome. And this led to the latter half of my high school years really being very prosperous, because the staff really embraced my abilities and allowed me to prosper as a unique individual, doing helping them with some of the tasks. I was an office aide. I read the morning announcements, things like that. That allowed me to function in my way. It brought value to what I had, and it just made it a lot better. So again, it's through self-advocacy and utilizing all of the resources. Unfortunately, and I say this with authority, you know, from my own personal experience, I can tell you I would not have had that if I did not have that diagnosis. Just because, and it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because diagnosis today is not easy. There's waiting lists, and it's certainly not cheap. So, you know, people really need these resources. So when I received them, it did a great deal for me. Thank you.
Thank you. We've heard that autistic people want autistic acceptance, not awareness. What is the difference? And then how can non-autistic or allistic people practice that acceptance? Owen.
So, yeah, this is actually something autists are still kind of working out among themselves. Some of us find the word awareness pathologizing and othering, but others make the very valid point that people still are not at all aware. Personally, I still prefer acceptance, and among my friends, I sometimes say appreciation. As an autistic person who also has a disease, the word awareness very much brings up the image of sickness for me. And the two things just require very different means of address. It feels safer too in a world where prominent organizations masquerading as charity, they are putting time and money into the idea of curing autism. Let me be clear, if you don't want people to be autistic anymore, you don't want there to be any more autistic people. The neurology is inseparable from the person. The goal amounts to nothing short of, eugenics. We're not an infestation. Many autistic people actually dread April because, we're hit over the head every day with the Autism Speaks imagery. All of their campaign, and everybody's lighting it up blue, and we use red instead. That's a hashtag if you're interested in that. But yeah, Autism Speaks is a hate group. They publicly have sympathized with filicide because we're just so hard to love. And it's just exhausting, constantly explaining to friends, family, and even strangers that it is not a tragedy not to have things that you would never want. That the issue isn't the fact that I don't want to be touched, it's that people won't stop touching me. I don't have any missing puzzle pieces. I think that acceptance and appreciation done properly include awareness efforts from the beginning. You can't accept what you don't know, or you're only accepting an inauthentic idea. And that doesn't help anyone. I recommend autistic people use like both words with a slash in the middle if you have to talk about it. That's what I've got.
Thank you. Lou? You hit your mute.
I would like to go further than acceptance. We accept things that are difficult, and good things we encourage and we embrace. And that's what I want from people. We are not a problem. And I think if people could recognize that autistic culture is real, we do have our own culture. The autistic community is not the parents of autistics, it's autistics, and we are speaking out. You can find us. I think, as an example, Target has days for autistic people where they dim the lights, the cashiers speak quietly, even I think the cash registers are quieted. These are simple things and they're probably great for everyone. So not just autistic people. So I think we can go further than acceptance. I think we can make things pleasant for everyone. And I think it's important to recognize that you might know someone who is autistic who has never told you. And so it's important to, keep that awareness, I guess, that there are, you don't know what's happening inside someone.
Thank you.
That's about it.
DJ.
Well, I think to some extent, everybody is aware, okay, to some extent, but not everybody accepts. So acceptance is in recognizing the full value of the person and not hindering them from achieving their goals and reaching their highest potential. That's acceptance. Anybody can be aware, but to accept. And I think back to my time in school and different times too now, but where people can very unknowingly get in the way of achieving, and I was recently in a situation. I was a seminarian, okay? I was a seminarian for the Catholic Church, studying to be a priest, and I was studying at Mount St. Mary's University in the seminary. And I did not receive the accommodations I needed, and I was told right to my face by the rector of this seminary that I would not be accommodated. And I've since left that program, and I'm on to better things now. But it's important to realize that the accommodations aren't the big deal. The accommodations are what allow us to be who we are and how we are. So it's very important. And that all comes down to acceptance. It all comes down to acceptance. And we can all do little things like what Rue was saying. That's a fantastic example. Dim the lights, turn down the music. How hard is that? Is that really going to cause problems? No. Of course not. So that all comes down to acceptance. And here we are in April. This is a great acceptance month. So a great time to discuss these things. But, the bottom line is just to know that autistics can just treat us like anybody else. And that the rest will come naturally. Don't try. If you're trying, it's going to not look natural, and it's going to create a hindrance, I'm telling you. So just speak to us like you speak to anybody else, and the rest will come on its own. Thank you.
Thank you. What do you wish schools understood about educating autistic people? I know we've touched on this as you've spoken, answering some of the other questions, but if we can kind of just narrow in specifically about schools and their understanding about educating autistic people.
So again, we're really experiencing these things. Our actions follow our internal logic just as much as yours do, even if you can't see how we got from A to B. Non-spoken communication is valid communication. Everyone needs breaks. everyone stims. Everyone needs to self-regulate. Now, educating anyone should mean identifying their needs, their interests, the way that they work, and adjusting the schedule and your behavior accordingly. People have a tendency to see even autistic children as difficulties in their own lives instead of other people having difficulties. I know that's hard to hear. But you know, oh, we're not obstacles to overcome. We're neighbors who need a hand, and especially, and I think people, you know, it's hard to keep this in your mind when you're dealing with them every day. Hey, I know how hard childcare is. You know, it's not comfortable to acknowledge that you might be doing this, but it's vital and it's a positive action. Kids' struggles don't make your own any less. It's still difficult, but your lacking compassion will make their experience worse. And, you know, at developmentally important stages, imagine that you yourself have to ask the stranger at the front of the room if you can use the bathroom. Imagine that you do not understand why. Imagine that every time the fluorescent light flickers, you get hit on the head with a blunt object and everyone tells you not to care because it isn't happening to them. I wish everyone within every system of schooling could really hold in their mind while they're doing their work that it is their job to help all people grow up with the tools they need to live well, rather than shaping them into something the dominant culture sees as acceptable.
Wow. Thank you, Rowan. That last line was amazing. Rue.
So I would like teachers to understand that autists are having a completely different experience than the other children, completely different in every way. And to be blunt, you're asking too much of children who are autistic. You know, talk about sensory assault again. God, to be stuck in a room that you can't leave, smells, noises, posters all over the place, being told what to do, the kind of crowded situation, it's a nightmare. And all I wanted to do was run out, get away. It's like a panic urge. You need to run away. And one thing that could be done that might help is to have a private space available. Rowan, I don't know if you want to talk about your closet. Is it okay if I talk about your closet? Okay, so even as an adult, Rowan has a closet that has a nice foamy, pillowy sides and bottom and blankets. And when she's feeling overwhelmed, she goes in there and it calms her. And it seems to me we could have a similar space in schools for children. And they shouldn't need to ask to go in it. When we're in that kind of zone, we're not able to think. We're not as easily able to communicate. So to have to stop and explain to you why I need to go here, it's just adding fuel to the fire. So I think that's something that could be done. I think you need to understand that many autistic people are in a constant state of distress. So the straw that breaks the camel's back can be anything. Something that you just would never notice in a million years. It's not just flickering lights, you know, it could be somebody chewing on their pencil or swallowing loudly. It can be anything. Also, as far as calling on kids, if you call on an autistic child, you are suddenly changing the expectation on them. And sudden changes, no good. We can't process that fast enough. So not only is it a stress if you're called on, but it's a stress to know you might be called on. So if, I don't know what the workaround with that would be, but maybe just only call on kids who are raising their hands.
I've read about teachers who would have like red Solo cup you could put on your table if you couldn't handle being called on that day, things like that.
Mhm.
Good idea.
Probably not a perfect example, solution, but it's in the right direction at least.
Thank you.
I have more to say on this, so you
Okay.
can stop me when I go on too long.
You-
Um,
Go ahead.
okay. That is a long day for a child, for any child, and it's an even longer day for an autistic child. So I think some consideration should be put into a reduced schedule, maybe longer breaks between things, in a quiet place where there are no expectations. You know, you wouldn't ask a child to go through that whole day without eating, but that's similar to what you're asking of autistic children, to just go through the whole day with no break other than lunch, which isn't a break for autistic people. And I wish that teachers would be very aware of the environment. Are there repetitive noises? Is there an odor? You know, the lights, obviously. You know, pay attention. Is the window open? Do you notice that somebody's upset every time the window's closed? That's what I do to calm myself, and other people can do that for us. And I also want to just reiterate that audio processing is hard, and we may do something that looks like we are not paying attention in order to pay attention. So please, no telling us we have to look at you while we speak, or we have to look at you while you're speaking. You know, I hear you better when I'm looking over here. And let's see, I think I had one more thing. But we need more personal space than other people. What, much more personal space than other people. You know, sitting next to us might be fine, but looming over us is not fine. And again, it brings up that fight or flight feeling. And let's see. Oh, autistic inertia is another thing that I want to mention for school. So there's more and more evidence that autism is a movement disorder. And one of the things that I and a lot of other people experience is autistic inertia. And it can make it so that I physically cannot move my body even when I want to do something. If I wanted to pick up my water right now, I could just be stuck in this position and unable to do it. So in a school environment where I'm being asked to do this and do this and do this and do this, I have to get unstuck every time I'm asked something new. And it's physically hard to do that. Sometimes it's impossible to do that. So just consider whether you're asking too much.
Thank you. DJ.
Yes, you know, I think Rue just summed it up very beautifully. You know, teachers are asking for way too much, and I can relate so much to the being called on unexpectedly. I can remember even to this day, you know, sitting in class, and I always knew that the teachers wanted to call on me because I didn't raise my hand, because I didn't want to talk, because you know it was going to make me very uncomfortable. So they always targeted me, and I would go through my day just in anxiety, hoping and praying that they were not going to call on me. I mean, this is ridiculous. And, you know, the teachers think that they're helping, but they're making the problem so much worse. So there is a great deal of ignorance within the education system. I went through the public education system. And really there was a great deal of ignorance. Fortunately, after my diagnosis, I was given great accommodations in different class settings, which greatly helped. But before that, it was really miserable for me. It was absolutely miserable. And I just felt that it was a constant conflict with the teachers because they didn't understand. And I wonder sometimes, you know, deep down inside, did they understand, and were they just doing this to be malicious? I don't know. I can't say. All I can say is that there's a great deal of lacking, at least in my experience. And I think that with proper education, and by the way, I think this should be mandatory because, you know, there are so many people autistic on the autism spectrum. I mean, teachers, educators should have some degree of knowledge of of what's expected. And I think that that will help. And you know, growing up, I just didn't have that. And I constantly, you know, I was constantly sent to the principal's office. And the ironic thing about that is that was my greatest relief, going to the principal's office, getting out of that classroom. And I didn't care at that point. It's just get me out of here. And then when that didn't work, I would pretend I was sick. I would go to the nurse's office. I just had to do something to get out of that room. And fortunately for me, even a friend to this day was my school nurse. And she understood me very well. And she just knew, you know, I just wanted to go down there just to decompress, because the classroom environment is brutal, especially when you're in a classroom with a lot of people. I mean, one of the greatest things was going to a smaller class. Less stimulations, less distractions, that helped. But when you're in a class, I mean, the average class size in my public school is probably 30, 35 people. That's too much. So, you know, with this proper accommodation and education for teachers, I think that that really will go a long way. So that's my hope for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final question for the evening is, how can we make the world a better place for autistic people? Rowan?
So again, remember that we're not aliens. We have the right to be here. We got here the same way as anybody else. But the world is built like we don't even exist. Work access into anything you build equitable societies. What that means will be different and complex for every individual thing. So I'll just say, deconstruct the idea that we are living life on altered settings, that there aren't enough of us, that it is worth it, that you don't know enough. If you don't know enough, go and learn. If you can't go and learn, find someone who knows and pay them. You know, a lot of the time, people of any marginalized identity, they are expected to educate without any sort of payment or really even respect, which thankfully is not the case here today. But you know, we're not living life on those altered settings. Even if we're non-speaking, even if we are loud, even if we use our bodies in ways that you do not, even if, you know, we're over here in our late 20s is having a meltdown because our sandwich was wrong. There's more to it. And, you know, even if there wasn't, if a person is having a hard time, you know, just try to be compassionate, because, you know, we're different. And you know, we have a lot of struggles that you might not understand. We also have some things that I kind of think of as superpower, or as I can find so many 4-leaf clovers. But the thing is, just if you spent half as much time considering the fact that you might be interacting with an autistic person as we spend working on the fact that we're probably interacting with an holistic person, that would do a whole hell of a lot.
Thank you. Rue?
So 2 things come to mind for me. And the first one is that rather than try to mold autistic people to fit the mainstream needs to reshape itself for us. And I do believe that that would benefit everybody, not just autistic people. And the second thing is, as Rowan said, educate yourself. There is so much to learn. And I know that because there was so much I had to learn when I found out I was autistic. And the information is available. There are books, there are websites of non-speaking and speaking autists. So make the effort. It's important.
DJ?
You know, I think it's just simply recognizing autism, like I said earlier, as an ability rather than a disability, and just accepting people as unique, gifted people who have a great deal to offer to society. I think that there's just a great stigma right now, we have to approach people a certain way, you have to interact with them in a certain way. Just be yourself and we'll be ourselves, and that's all it comes down to at the end of the day. It's not about trying to be somebody you're not. And, we want to accept and we want people to accept us. And that harmony is what makes the world a better place, because every person, whether you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, everybody has something unique to offer to society. And we can never forget that no matter who the person is, any human person has something to offer. And we must always remember that and embrace that. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so